Respiratory system. What is respiratory system and what is the purpose of respiratory system? Anatomically, we can define respiratory system as this is the system which is composed of the nasal cavities, the larynx, the trachea, the bronchis, bronchioles and alveoli, right? And functionally we can define the respiratory system that it is the system which is responsible for breathing and respiration. Now you will tell me what is the actual difference between the respiration and breathing. Anyone? One person who know what is the difference between respiration and breathing. Raise your hands. You. Glucose is breakdown into small molecules and energy. Good. Breathing is the process of inhalation and exhalation of air to lungs and out of lungs to external environment, right? And respiration is the breakdown process through which our body nutrients break down into small molecules and convert or produce energy in the form of ATP, adenosine triphosphate, right? So now in respiration or in respiratory system physiology, we will focus on what is respiration, what is the role of alveoli in respiration, how the oxygen goes into the blood, how they transport to heart, and from heart how they transport it to body tissues, and how they transfer to body tissues, from body tissues how the carbon dioxide get back into blood, and how that carbon dioxide is transported into lungs, right? These all behind these mechanisms there is a very good and important pathways, right? The only thing which is responsible for the transport of gases is the partial pressure. Remember that the gases will move from high partial pressure to low partial pressure. For example, if I have a gas here, for example, this is the gas, oxygen, right? And the pressure here is 140 mm of Hg, right? This oxygen will move here because here oxygen partial pressure is, for example, 40 mm of Hg, right? Until this transport will occur until both the pressures will become same, right? So this is the point that for how much time the oxygen will diffuses into blood, and for how much time this oxygen will diffuses into body tissues, right? How many oxygen molecules well transported to body tissues, or in 1 minute how many content of oxygen will transported to body tissues, and how much content of oxygen will go back into lungs from body tissues. We will discuss this in today's lecture, right? First of all, we will start from simple respiratory system, that how this gaseous exchange occur, or how these gases transported into body, right? Which thing is responsible for transport of oxygen in body? Hemoglobin. There are how many types of hemoglobin in body? There are 4 types of hemoglobin in our body, right? The 3 are normals and one is abnormal, useless, right? First of all, for example, respiratory system is composed of trachea. The trachea is divided into bronchi or bronchioles, right? This is, for example, one lung and this is another, Any problem? Here we have gas division and at terminal alveoli are present, right? If we are taking both the lungs, right? From here, if we inhaling oxygen through inhalation, we will take oxygen from external environment. And from where this oxygen occurs? It is coming from photosynthesis process. It is done by green trees, right? This oxygen here will diffuses into the blood. Diffuses into blood, and now this blood is called oxygenated blood. Is this blood is fully oxygenated? Anyone? After diffusing of this oxygen, is this blood is fully oxygenated or not? Why? Why? There is some veins adding to these arteries. We will discuss this. This is oxygenated blood, and this oxygenated blood is coming from lungs. This vein is called pulmonary vein. This is the only vein in body which carry oxygenated blood, right? And it will goes into, right? I will try to make this diagram clear. This is very important for your papers, right? Also for your daily life, right? For hospitals and, right? For example, this is respiratory system. We have two lungs, of course, right? And we are inhaling oxygen, right? We have two parts of heart. One is right heart and second is left heart. The right heart is for deoxygenated blood and left is for oxygenated blood, right? For example, this is the blood which is passing from this area, right? This is pulmonary vein. This is the only vein in body which carry oxygenated blood, right? I have already told you that any vessel which is joining the heart is vein, and any vessel which is arising from heart is called artery, right? So this is vein which carry oxygenated blood. Oxygenated blood mean 4HbO2. We will discuss why this is 4HbO2, right? This is oxygenated blood. This oxygenated blood goes into the left atrium of heart. Left atrium of heart. For example, this is the left atrium, right? It will take the oxygenated blood from lungs, right? From here, this blood will go the left into left ventricle, right? And from left ventricle, this oxygenated blood with oxygen will transported into all the body tissues, right? In last, we will calculate that amount of oxygen that in 1 minute every tissue of body gets how much oxygen, right? With one cardiac cycle or with one cardiac output. Cardiac output is how many? In 1 minute cardiac output is 5 liters. 5000 ml blood is pumping by left ventricle during 1 minute, right? Now this is oxygenated blood having oxygen, right? And we have body tissues here. For example, these are body tissues. It may be the tissue from bone, it may be the tissue from liver, it may be the tissue from muscles, right? But all the cells of our body consuming oxygen regularly, right? In resting condition, for example, now you are in resting condition. In resting condition, it will consume minimum oxygen, and during exercise or severe exercises, it will consume more oxygen as compared to resting, right? For example, this muscle cell, and regularly the respiration process, for example, the glycolysis, the Krebs cycle, the electron transport chain, they are regularly occurring here, right? And it will consume oxygen, right? For ATP synthesis, oxygen is necessary, oxygen is required, right? So the partial, due to the partial pressure difference here, the oxygen will move or diffuse from blood into tissues, right? But remember one thing, this is common, that this oxygen will first goes into the plasma, then to the extracellular fluids, and from there extracellular fluids it will go into the cell, and in cell it will consume by the processes which occur in cytoplasm, mean glycolysis, which occur in the mitochondria, mitochondrial matrix, which is Krebs cycle, and which occur in the intermitochondrial membrane is electron transport chain. It will also consume this oxygen. So it's mean that the oxygen content will decreasing here, and when oxygen content is decreasing in blood, it will decrease or it will drop the partial pressure, right? Mean that this oxygen will diffuses into the cells until the partial pressure become same in both the cell and blood, right? Now here the partial pressure of oxygen is low, the partial pressure of oxygen is low here in tissues, and the partial pressure of oxygen in blood is high. How much we will discuss, right? But this is the general concept. But the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is high here, and the partial pressure of carbon dioxide is low here. Mean that this carbon dioxide will diffuse from here into blood, right? And when this carbon dioxide dissolved in this blood, it will become deoxygenated, right? We will discuss that this is deoxygenated blood, or we are asking only this, that this is deoxygenated, right? Now this blood is deoxygenated, right? It will goes into the right atrium. For example, this is right atrium, right? This is deoxygenated blood. From here it will goes into the right ventricle, and from right ventricle through the pulmonary trunk, it will goes, our pulmonary artery, it will goes into back into lungs, right? And due to partial pressure difference here in lungs and blood, this carbon dioxide will again diffuses into the lungs, and when we exhale, this carbon dioxide will goes outside, right? This is the process of discussion today, right? We will discuss that how this oxygen get diffuses into here, right? What is the partial pressure here? What is the there are three things which is important in all the spaces of gaseous exchange. You will remember that three things, and when you remember that three things, you will understand this process easily, right? The first thing is, what is the partial pressure of the concerned gas? Partial pressure of carbon dioxide or partial pressure of oxygen, right? What is the saturation of oxygen? hemoglobin, sorry. Saturation means that how many oxygens are attached to hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is very uh, unique protein, right? It's not a common protein, right? And you will surprise that hemoglobin is very toxic protein to body, right? Like carbon dioxide is also toxic because it gives acidity to blood, and when the content of carbon dioxide is high in blood, it will raise the acidity of blood, and we will call that acidosis, right? And this is very dangerous process. If this hemoglobin is in free form in body and circulating, it is very toxic to body, right? And it will damage the kidneys, hemoglobin, right? So there is a protective coating around the hemoglobin, right? We will discuss this in detail, but you will remember the partial pressure of oxygen, the saturation of hemoglobin with oxygen, and the third thing is the content of, or the amount of oxygen transferring by hemoglobin. How, for example, if I have a glass of water, and the capacity of that glass is 100 ml of water, for example, this is the capacity, this is the saturation 100%. But now I will see that how much water is present in glass: 50 ml, 60 ml, 70 ml. The capacity is 100 ml, right? So the capacity of the hemoglobin with oxygen is called the saturation of hemoglobin, and the oxygen attached bounded presently to hemoglobin is the content of oxygen which is transferring by hemoglobin. We will take 100 ml of blood, right? Because in all calculations in blood or in drugs, we are taking 100 ml of blood, right? We cannot calculate exactly the values of oxygen and carbon dioxide because they are traveling or transferring from one side to another side, but we will take 100 ml and we will see that how much oxygen or how much hemoglobin is present in that 100 ml of blood, because one RBC have a lot of hemoglobin molecules, right? There is no one hemoglobin molecule in RBC. RBC have a lot of hemoglobin molecules, and one hemoglobin molecule is the polymer of 4 monomers of hemoglobin, right? This is the polymer, the hemoglobin, right? Now we will take one lung, right, and we will split this heart into two parts, right? We will see the right and left separately, and we will take one cell here, right? But before that, we will discuss what is internal respiration. Anyone? What is internal respiration and what is external respiration? Respiration with body surface is called external, and internal blood and body cells. You are clear? You are sleeping. You all are sleeping. Why? This is external respiration. The respiration with external environment is external respiration. This is internal respiration. The respiration with body tissues is internal respiration, right? What is pulmonary circulation? What is pulmonary circulation? The circulation between the lungs and heart. What is systemic circulation? The circulation between the body tissues and heart. What is hepatic circulation? Liver and heart. What is coronary circulation? Heart and heart. The circulation between the aorta and heart muscles, heart tissues, heart cells, right? This is coronary circulation. We have a lot of types of circulation. We have bronchial circulation. Bronchial circulation is circulation between this blood and lungs tissues, deep lung tissues, right? Because these are smooth muscles and it consuming oxygen and nutrients and energy, right? So this is bronchial. So we will add one circulation more. We have one pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation. Pulmonary circulation is opposite circulation when we compare it with systemic circulation, because here arteries transport deoxygenated blood and veins transport oxygenated blood, right? This is the circulation between heart and lungs, right? The next circulation is systemic circulation. Systemic circulation is between heart and body tissues. You remember? You are understanding, right? The third one is coronary circulation. Coronary circulation is between heart tissues and heart, aorta. Am I right? Aorta, right? The fourth one is hepatic circulation. Hepatic circulation is between heart and liver. The next circulation is portal circulation. The portal circulation is in between liver and GI tract. Portal circulation, right? And now we will add one another circulation, not the renal circulation. We are not discussing the kidneys, the urinary system. We will add that in renal system, right? Now we are adding the bronchial circulation. Bronchial circulation, and this bronchial circulation have a very important role in this process, right? Bronchial circulation is in between the bronchial arteries and deep lungs tissues. The bronchial circulation, the bronchial arteries, deep lung tissues, and this thing. This is the pulmonary vein. Pulmonary vein. Right? The pulmonary circulation, systemic circulation. Pulmonary circulation is in between heart and lungs. Systemic circulation is between heart and body tissues. Coronary circulation is aorta and heart tissues. Hepatic circulation is in between heart and liver. The portal circulation is in between liver and GI. And bronchial circulation, bronchial arteries and pulmonary vein, right? Here you will remember that our liver gets two types of blood. One is oxygenated and one is partially oxygenated, right? We will discuss this in hepatic circulation. Now we will focus on this process. This is the respiratory process, but before this we will dive in hemoglobin for a while. What is hemoglobin? Hemoglobin is very naughty, right? Because at once or at one time it only can attach one oxygen, and when the one side is get saturated, he inform or he touch the another side to open their mouth and get the oxygen, because body is lungs is distributing oxygen, right? It's just like when you are running behind khairatuna. ठीक ना? The khairat pasi shata garze. ठीक ना? No, the hemoglobin chale kana, it is running behind oxygen, and where the oxygen concentration is high, the hemoglobin will very happy, and where the oxygen content will low, hemoglobin will happy, not sad, right? Because he is not giving their oxygen, full oxygen to body tissues. He is hiding the oxygen in pockets, right? Now we will discuss that in detail. This is very interesting process. interesting topic, right? First, for example, this is my right side of heart, right side, right? And this is left side of heart. Left side is specific for oxygenated blood, and this is deoxygenated blood, right? Here I will take a cell from my muscles, tissues. For example, this is muscle cell, myocyte, right? I am taking this example because you all know about this, because we have discussed this, right? And here I will take one alveoli from lungs, right? One alveoli only. We are not discussing anatomy of respiratory system, we are discussing physiology, right? So we will take one alveoli and we'll discuss the exchange of gases, right? Which type of tissues is made in this alveoli? Cuboidal epithelium. Have you ever studied my tissues lecture again? No. Simple squamous epithelium is present in alveoli because diffusions occurs, gaseous exchange occur in alveoli. Can the oxygen get diffused from cuboidal and stratified? No. Simple squamous epithelium is present in alveoli. For example, I will remove this topic because you all know that this is respiratory system, right? We will also discuss some mathematical processes here, right? Today we will engineering students, right? This is, for example, this is this is alveoli. For example, alveoli is made up of two types of cells. One is called, any problem, backbenchers? Why you are talking? If you are not interested in lecture, you can leave the class. This is alveoli. Alveoli is composed of two types of cells. One is type 1 pneumocyte and the second one is type 2 pneumocytes, right? Because surface tension is very necessary in gaseous exchange or partial pressures, right? When we are dealing the pulmonary patients, we are calculating regularly the partial pressures, the oxygen saturations, right, by oximeters, right, affects to this finger, right, because oxygen saturation is very necessary for body functions and the circulation, right? So here we have two types of cells. For example, these are the simple squamous epithelium and these are also simple squamous epithelium, but they are such different in shape. These are and the black is the basement membrane, right? Here, when we inhale oxygen, when we are inhaling oxygen, for example, this is the oxygen coming from outside. Now oxygen is in alveoli, right? Here it will try to diffuse into the blood. We will take this capillary a little bit larger because we have to discuss a lot of things here. This is the capillary, right? This oxygen, the target of this oxygen is to diffuse into this blood for oxygenation, right? But how it is diffuses, how it will diffuse? Due to pressure difference. Write it down with yourself, right? This diffusion occur due to the pressure difference in alveoli and blood, right? What is the partial pressure of oxygen in alveoli? Anyone? These are such things which every doctor or every medical student should know these values, right? The partial pressure of oxygen in alveoli is 104 mm of Hg, right? The partial pressure of oxygen in alveoli is 104 mm of Hg, and the blood coming from right heart, for example, this blood is coming from right heart, from here. This blood is coming from right heart. The blood coming from right heart having the partial pressure of, here the partial pressure of oxygen, because we are discussing that this diffusion occur due to partial pressure difference. What will be the partial pressure here? It must be 40 mm of Hg. 40 mm of Hg. These are the values mentioned in your medical physiology guide and book, right? 40 mm of Hg. Now, in start, I have told you that the oxygen will, the gases, all the gases will diffuse from the area where the partial pressure is high to the area where the partial pressure is low. So here this oxygen will diffuses into blood, right? But for how many times this diffusion will occur? Until the partial pressure here become 100. When the partial pressure becomes same to alveoli, no further diffusion will take place. Am I right? Right? Here the partial pressure is 40 mm of Hg. In alveoli, the partial pressure is 100, 100, 100, right? Forget about this 104. You will get confused. This is 100 mm of Hg. Actually, it is 104, right? When the pressure here become, partial pressure here become 100 mm of Hg, this diffusion will stop, right? For example, I am getting only 100 ml of blood. That 100 ml of blood coming from right heart, right? And 100 ml of blood is passing from this area, right? This, when this partial pressure becomes same, this diffusion will stop, and this blood will goes into left side of heart. Now this oxygen, how it transported? You all know this is transported due to hemoglobin, and hemoglobin is present in blood, right? What is the structure of hemoglobin? Anyone? And how it get attached to oxygen? Any one of you? Anyone intelligent? Four pyrrole rings. Good. 4 pyrrole rings, and one ring is called, let me tell you. For example, we have hemoglobin, mean This hemoglobin have two parts. One is heme and second one is globin. For example, hemoglobin is four rings, having four rings, right? For example, this is one ring of hemoglobin, right? This is the second ring of hemoglobin. This is the third ring of hemoglobin, and this is the fourth ring. Right now, you will go back to genes. There are some genes which are responsible for protein synthesis of this heme. These are only heme parts of hemoglobin, right? And all these are attached to one iron molecule. For example, this is iron molecule. All these are attached to this iron molecule, right? Which form of iron is present in hemoglobin? In our body, we have two types of irons. One is ferric and one is ferrous. Ferric and ferrous. In hemoglobin, when you want that this is active hemoglobin and can attach to oxygen, the iron must be in ferrous form. Write it down. This is your paper MCQ. Right? That in normal hemoglobin, the iron must be in ferrous form. Fe plus 2. Fe plus 2. Right? And when this iron become ferric, Fe plus 3, it is now called the metahemoglobin or methemoglobin. Methemoglobin or metaglobin, which is useless, which cannot attach to oxygen and cannot transfer oxygen, right? So the iron present here is in ferrous form, ferrous, right? These are the four rings. This whole structure is heme. This is called heme, right? And this heme part is used by a very good parasite called malarial parasite, Vivax falciform, which is a plasmodium, right? Plasmodium, do you know about plasmodium, which is responsible for causing malaria, right? Malaria is consuming this heme in our body, right? Consuming means first of all it get polymerized to hemozoins, right? We will discuss that in detail, but the point which I want to clear for you that this is very toxic thing, very toxic, right? And if this is in free form in blood, it will kill the plasmodium, the bacteria, etc. Right? Now, for example, this is the globin chain. This is the globin chain attached to this ring, this heme group, right? This is globin chain. When these two are in joint formed, it is called hemoglobin. But this is not the polymer of hemoglobin, and it have the ability only to attach with one oxygen, only to attach with one oxygen, and hemoglobin can bind four oxygen, right? Mean that this hemoglobin is composed of four monomer of hemoglobin. One hemoglobin polymer have four hemoglobin monomers, right? But before that, the genes are responsible for formation of these proteins. These are proteins, right? For example, I have a cell. This is the cell. This is the cell. Do you remember the growth factors genes and the responder genes, right? All their genes are working here, but the main genes which is performing dissection are, for example, this is chromosome, this is one gene, second gene, third gene, and fourth gene, right? This is what we are discussing, the types of hemoglobin in our body, right? Types of hemoglobin. If you want to write, this is the types of hemoglobin. We are representing this hemoglobin by Hb, right? For example, this is alpha gene, this is beta gene, this is gamma, and this is delta, right? You will remember that this alpha gene is always expressing, alpha gene is always expressing, mean that all hemoglobin types have alpha hemoglobin alpha globin chains, and must have two alpha globin chains, right? For example, for example, this is iron, this is iron, right? And these are the rings around this iron. This is one, mean that one hemoglobin monomer have polymer have four monomers, right? This is the second one, this is the third one, and this is the fourth one, right? It need a very clear concept, right? These are the heme of four polymers of four monomers of hemoglobin polymer, right? Now I have told you that this alpha gene will always expressing, right? So this hemoglobin must have two alpha globin chains. This is alpha globin chain, right? And this is also alpha globin chain, right? When there are beta chains, when this gene is expressing with alpha, when this gene is expressing with alpha, it will attach to the beta globin chains, the other two will attach to the beta globin chain, right? And in this case, this hemoglobin is called HbA, hemoglobin type A. A is used for adults. This hemoglobin is present in adults, right? This hemoglobin have two alpha chain, alpha plus two beta globin chain, right? And four pyrrole rings, right? And this is the hemoglobin which is present abundantly in adults, right? Now if, for example, these are the heme parts, right? And already this alpha gene is always expressing, so it have two alpha globin chains, right? But when with alpha globin chain, when there is delta, when there is delta gene is expressing, mean if it have two delta globin chains, right? This type of globin is called HbA2. It is called Hb hemoglobin type A2, and this is partially or and very less amount present in adults. It have alpha plus delta and delta, right? This is the second type of hemoglobin which is present in adults also, but in small amount, right? The next, for example, I have, what are these four rings? These are nitrogenous rings which are attached by one iron molecule, right? Two will be alpha globin chains, right? But when this alpha with alpha gene, when gamma gene is expressing, mean that two chain are gamma globins, it will called HbF. It will called HbF, and F is for fetus, right? This type of hemoglobin is present in fetus. It have two alpha chains and two gamma chains, right? What will be the fourth one? Anyone? The fourth type of hemoglobin, that when iron is converted into ferric form, called methemoglobin. The fourth one is methemoglobin. In this, ferric form is present, Fe plus 3, and this type of hemoglobin is useless. Useless means it is not working properly, or it cannot attach to oxygen, it cannot transport oxygen from one place to another in our body, right? So these are the four types of hemoglobin, right? Now this hemoglobin have how many capacity? 4. It can attach to 4 oxygen molecule. It has 4 sites. For example, I am taking this hemoglobin here again. Are you understanding? Right, these are very simple things about hemoglobin, and I think these are new for you people, right? It's new learning, you are lucky, right? These are globin, right? These are the 4 monomers which is making one hemoglobin polymer, right? Now this is the first site for binding oxygen. This is the second site for oxygen binding, and this is the third, this is the fourth. At a fourth site, 4 sites for oxygen binding, right? This is 1, 2, 3 and 4. Mean that this is a car, this is a car in which only 4 passenger can travel, right? The hemoglobin is a special car in our blood which can transport only 4 passengers, and the passengers are oxygen, right? Now for example, this hemoglobin is present here for transporting of oxygen, right? This is that hemoglobin. I will make it like this. Are you understanding now? These are the sites for binding of oxygen. Now you will tell me, when this hemoglobin is coming from right heart, when this is coming from right heart, how many oxygen already binded to this hemoglobin? 4. This is deoxygenated blood. How many oxygen will already bind? Mean that in a car, when it have a capacity of 4 passengers, when it is coming from right heart, how many passengers have already sat in the car? 1. Who are agree with 1? Raise your hands. So what? You are not agree. Munafiqin mo gore pag jahannam kelto na lan dikanday. Anyone? This topic is very important also for MDCAT. Who attempt MDCAT last time? That's mean you have already studied these things. Oh. 2.6. Now you will understand this, right? When this hemoglobin is coming, before this story, this hemoglobin is very toxic. I have already told you that this hemoglobin is very toxic. When it traveling in free form in blood, it will damage your kidneys, because our nephron have some type of meshes which is called glomerulus, right? And a basement membrane also have pseudopodic cells, right? When this hemoglobin is passing from that area, for example, this is the Bowman's capsule and this is the glomerulus, and when this hemoglobin, this for example, this is hemoglobin, and when it running in free form in your blood, it will get filtered from here, but it is very large molecule and it will suspended in this area. For example, now this hemoglobin is hanging from these basement membranes, right? And it will damage this area and your GFR will become rise, your crit will become raise, right? And mean that this hemoglobin is now damaging your kidneys. So how we are protecting, or how we are protected from this toxic hemoglobin? Anyone? Which membrane is enclosed this hemoglobin? This hemoglobin is present in RBC, inside RBC, not outside, right? And the membrane of RBC is encapsulated this hemoglobin. For example, I have this beautiful RBC here. This is RBC, and this RBC have this hemoglobin. Oh, sorry, hemoglobin, right? So this membrane enclose this hemoglobin and we are protected by this RBC from this toxicity of hemoglobin, right? Now this hemoglobin is passing from here, so it's mean that already it is 75% saturated, mean that this hemoglobin have already attached to 3 oxygens when it is coming from right heart. It is not fully deoxygenated blood, because when a blood have 75% of oxygen and only 25% of carbon dioxide, this blood is deoxygenated or oxygenated. This is more oxygenated than deoxygenated, right? So this is partial deoxygenated blood. Already 1, 2, 3. These 3 oxygens are already attached to this hemoglobin. Mean that this car is coming here from only one passenger. This hemoglobin is coming to lungs for only attaching one oxygen molecule, right? Here the partial pressure difference, this is the partial pressure difference. Partial pressure here is 100 mm of Hg, and here the partial pressure is 40 mm of Hg. This oxygen will get diffused from the alveoli into blood until this partial pressure become same. Now here one more oxygen will bind to this hemoglobin, right? and now this hemoglobin is 100% saturated. This is 100% saturated, mean that at partial pressure of 100, remember this point or write this point in your notebooks, right? At 100 mm of Hg, when the partial pressure is 100 mm of Hg, the hemoglobin is 100% saturated. I have told you that there are 3 or 4 parameters which you will remember in every point. What is the saturation of Hb, what is the partial pressure, and what is the amount or content of oxygen, right? So these are the 2 parameters here. One is partial pressure become 100 mm of Hg, and Hb is 100% saturated because all the sites are filled by oxygen, right? Now what is the affinity, how this site get the affinity for oxygen? Because this hemoglobin is not a common protein, it is not a common, it is very very important or very unique or very naughty, right? Because for example, if I have here, for example, this is the beautiful hemoglobin, right? First, when no oxygen is binded to this hemoglobin, all these sites are closed, all these sites are closed, and only one site is opening their mouth, right? When the backbenchers, when they are going to masjid, and after pray, if someone brings the cooked rice or biryani, right, they start eating. When they full, he called to another friend, come here, right? Here is biryani, very spicy, right? So when he come, he start eating, and when he full his stomach, he called another friend, right? But before filling his stomach, he is not calling to anyone. If there is remaining oxygen or remaining rice or remaining biryani, he will call to another friend, and until the biryani is finished by 4 friends, right? Just like that, this hemoglobin, when it attached to one oxygen, this is the beautiful oxygen attached to this site, he activate this site, and he is telling that open your mouth, there is oxygen outside, right? Eat some oxygen, right? So he well attached to another oxygen, right? And when he is fully attached to this oxygen, he will call to this side, open your mouth, there is oxygen, right? And he will get that oxygen. Now together these 3 sites, it will activate this side because these 3 friends are filled now, right? So what is the affinity for the 4th oxygen? This is very high affinity, because the affinity by this side, and by this side. When one oxygen is attached to this hemoglobin, the affinity for this is only giving by one side, right? When these 2 sides are filled, the affinity to this site is given by 2 sides, right? And when these 3 are filled, the affinity to this site is given by 3 sides, and the affinity of this 4th one is very high for oxygen, and that is the affinity by which here this oxygen is bounded to get it 100% saturated, right? So the partial pressure is here is, and now when you are reading articles or books, you will see a sentence that due to the admixture of the bronchial circulation, the bronchial blood, this partial pressure drop into 95 mm of Hg, right? Because when you are studying, you will see that the partial pressure of oxygen in arteries are 95 mm of Hg, not 100%, not 100 mm of Hg. What is the reason behind that? Anyone? What happened here that this partial pressure is dropped from 100 to 95, and this saturation is also dropped from 100 to 97? Anyone? Anyone intelligent doctor who will treat me when I become old, right, in future? Because I will not treat myself with a very unintelligent doctor. Anyone intelligent among you? Now listen. Now listen. The question is how this partial pressure is dropped from 100 to 95 directly here, because the partial pressure is become 100 mm of Hg, but when it goes to the left atrium, it will 95 mm of Hg. Why? This is the question. If you are searching in Google, Google will not answer you. There is something loves to the book lovers, the bibliophiles people. Do you know bibliophile? Bibliophile means books lover. So this is something which is understanding by the bibliophile people, the bibliophile students. Right? Now listen. I have told you that there is one circulation in there which is called bronchial circulation. What is bronchial circulation? For example, can I remove this area? This hemoglobin. Now listen carefully. Attention please. For example, I have these trachea and these are the lungs, and we are talking about this alveoli, etc. Right? There are the deep tissues present in lungs, because the functional tissues, right? Here are the bronchial arteries, which is supplying the deep tissues of lungs, right? When it goes, for example, this is the lung tissue, right? And of course it will need energy, right? So when this oxygen is diffused into here and carbon dioxide will diffuse back into this blood, this artery, this efferent bronchial artery will directly join this artery, not mean that in this the deoxygenated blood is adding. This is the efferent bronchial artery having deoxygenated blood. After respiration it will join this, but fortunately this amount is very small. If this amount was large, it must well affect the whole body, right? And in some patients this content become great and the patient gets cyanosed, right? Because now the deoxygenated blood is circulating in body, right? For example, here the deoxygenated blood is adding to this oxygenated blood, and they are mixing, and this is the bronchial circulation. I have told you that the bronchial circulation is between the bronchial arteries and pulmonary vein, sorry, right? So the books point this phenomena as the admixture of bronchial circulation. Now here the partial pressure is 100 mm of Hg, right? And when deoxygenated blood is added to this circulation, the partial pressure will increases or decreases? It will, of course it will decreases, because there is no oxygen present in this circulation, right? So partially, because this is very low amount, so this partial pressure is dropped from 100 mm to 95 mm of Hg. Understand? Due to the admixture, write it down, due to the admixture of bronchial circulation, the partial pressure in the pulmonary or the oxygenated blood, it dropped from 100 to 95, right? And now remember that phenomena of a glass. I have a glass and it has the capacity of 100 ml of water, right? And now I will see that how many water is present in this glass. When the partial pressure is low, of course this saturation will become low, right? But fortunately, the hemoglobin is working on another way as compared to other proteins. For example, I am taking graph here for you people, right? It's not, it's only for you, right? For example, this is a graph, and this x is showing me this side, the partial pressure, right? And this graph is showing me the saturation of Hb. Here it is 100%, and here, for example, this point, yes, this point, this is 100 mm of Hg, right? For example, this is 0, 10, 20, 30, and this is 0, this is 50, and this is 100, right? The partial pressure here is 40, mean that in veins the partial pressure will decreases into 40 mm of Hg, right? Here, for example, I am not talking about hemoglobin, I am talking about a common protein. When it gets saturated, this graph will go linearly. If you remember the physics, the linear graphs, when this is in proportional condition, direct proportion, the graph will must be straight, right? When this become 100, this will also become 100. And for example, in common condition, when this pressure is dropped from 100 to 50, it will also drop from 100 to 50. When it drop from 100 to, for example, 80, it will also 80. But hemoglobin is not following this rule. Therefore, we are saying that hemoglobin is a unique protein which have worked on unique way as compared to other proteins in body, because when this pressure is decreasing, hemoglobin is not straightly decreasing their saturation. It will move like this. The curve for the hemoglobin saturation is move like this, right? It's mean that up to 50 decreasing, hemoglobin is not willing to give oxygen to anyone. It is trying to get saturated, right? But when we drop the partial pressure below 50, 0 and 50, right, the hemoglobin is, for example, if I am a hemoglobin and I have a lot of money, right? Here, for example, here are a lot of money is placed, right? And when I am goes here, I am collecting that money, right? For example, this is oxygen, right? And when I turn and came here, here are very poor peoples, right? And I get mercy, and I am giving that money to the poor people, right? But here, these are middle class people, and I am not willing to give my money to these people. When I am here are very poor, and I am get mercy, and I want to donate my money in these people, right? Hemoglobin is working like this. When hemoglobin goes to lungs, there the oxygen content is very high, and hemoglobin is collecting oxygen. When he is passing from here, he is not willing to give their oxygen to anyone. But when the hemoglobin reaches here, he see that here the oxygen content is very low, and this cell needs oxygen. If there will no oxygen, that this cell will become die, right? If there is no nutrients for this cell, it will become die. So hemoglobin get mercy and give some money or some oxygen to this cell, right? Like that, up to 50. If up to 50, only, for example, when this pressure is dropped to from 100 to 50, mean that partial pressure of oxygen is 50 mm of Hg. The saturation is only dropped by 15, mean here it is 85%, and 50% and 50 mm of Hg partial pressure, the hemoglobin only lost 15% saturation, right? And when we goes to 40 mm of Hg, now listen carefully to this point. When we, because the partial pressure here is 40 mm of Hg, right? When this oxygen is dropped to 40 mm of Hg, it will rapidly drop his saturity to again by 10%, right? And now the saturation is 10%, 75%, right? So it's mean that when the blood is coming here and the partial pressure is 40 mm of Hg, the saturation must be 75%. Now look at me here. If we contribute these sides, right, in 100, 25%, 25%, 25%, and 25%, the three sides are already filled, and when we add 25, 25 and 25, it become 75%. So on partial pressure of 40 mm of Hg, the hemoglobin is 75% saturated, and when another oxygen is attached to here, we will add this 25 to 75, and it will become 100% saturated, sorry, right? Now if this partial pressure is decreased only by 10 degrees or 5 degrees, it become 95 mm of Hg, this will decrease very slowly, right? And the saturation become 97%, right? So at 95 mm of Hg, the saturation of Hb is 97%. Understand? Now one parameter is remaining, the content of oxygen. What is the content of oxygen in this 100 ml of blood? This 100 ml of blood, of course, right? Now according to research, 1 gram of hemoglobin can bind to 1.34 ml of oxygen, right? Now we will go for some mathematical. Do you want to get fresh for 5 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, we will start after a short break, right? Varsha.